Wittgenstein never became a historical writer in the same way some of us are, who nevertheless who seek to extend his lines of thinking. He became neither a historian of philosophy, nor a dedicated philosopher of history, nor did he set out to reflect on language as a historical reality. What would he have thought of our endeavor to see him as a historical figure, and to see his work as a response to a historical moment? Admittedly, we can't ignore his fascination with Spengler's Decline of the West and the historical and meta-historical issues it raises. But what exactly did he take from Spengler? I conjecture that it was due to Spengler that he would later on write of world pictures as giving our individual acts and utterances their meaning. Spengler had spoken of the possession of such a world picture as a unique cultural achievement, something far from being fixed and universal. He had talked of children and, quote, primitive man, as lacking as yet any such thing. Only advanced cultures, he had declared, possess a concept of world, and are therefore capable of constructing a coherent world picture out of the mass of their heterogeneous knowledge. The resulting world picture manifests itself in a culture's, quote, visible, tangible, and comprehensible expressions, acts and opinions, religion and state, art and science, peoples and cities, economic and social forms, speech, laws, customs, characters, facial lines, and costumes. End of quote. Wittgenstein may have been particularly struck by Spengler's observation that, quote, one condition for this higher world consciousness is the possession of language, meaning thereby not mere human utterance, but an encultured language, Kultursprache. Non-historical man, so Spengler has only a scattered set of beliefs. The possession of a single coherent picture of the world is, however, according to Spengler, only one precondition for a historical form of existence. The world picture of historical man will be more specifically one in which the world is seen as becoming, not as become. That is, as dynamic rather than a static or even timeless reality. Spengler writes, quote, historical man, as I understand the word, is the man of a culture that is in full march towards self-fulfillment. Before this, after this, outside this, man is historyless. From this there follows a fact of the most decisive importance, and one that has never before been established. That man is not only historyless before the birth of culture, but again, becomes so as soon as civilization has worked itself out fully to the definitive form which betokens the end of the living development of the culture and the exhaustion of the last potentialities of its significant existence. According to Spengler, the West has now reached the rigid state of civilization, a state in which the belief in progress, machines, and mechanical construction dominate, and the culture in its classical form has become defunct. We are familiar with such sentiments from Wittgenstein's writings around 1931, exactly the time when he was reading Spengler's Decline. The affinities between the two are particularly evident from his 1931 sketch for a foreword. We may then imagine that Spengler helped Wittgenstein to see that his own earlier anti-historicism was itself a symptom of the fact that the West was now in a state of civilization in which its living culture had deteriorated into a catatonic condition, and that as a man without history, as which he had portrayed himself in his 1916 remark, he had unwittingly made himself part of that civilization from which he now felt so deeply alienated. There are additional lessons Wittgenstein may have learned from Spengler. Spengler had argued also that when we grow into a culture, we acquire our world picture not, quote, by definition or proof, but through, quote, feeling, experience, and intuition. He had spoken of world pictures as a mythology on which a culture is built, and here Wittgenstein appears to have taken him once again more up when he wrote later on in Uncertainty that the propositions describing a world picture, quote, might be part of a kind of mythology. Yet there are also telling differences between Spengler's and Wittgenstein's notion of world pictures. Spengler assumes that every great culture has a fixed world picture that is created at the beginning of its history, which it then develops until it is exhausted, at which point the culture reaches a state of purely mechanical existence and finally, one of inevitable decline, a condition called civilization. Wittgenstein was certainly in tune with Spengler's pessimism and his characterization of Western culture as having reached that state of civilization. But he spoke of world pictures in uncertainty not as fixed but as dynamic entities. Quote, the mythology may change back into a state of flux, he wrote famously. The riverbed of thought may shift. He set himself thus apart from Spengler's historical determinism and allowed for the possibility that, quote, this for culture and value, that perhaps one day this civilization will produce a culture. So just as culture has generated civilization as its end phase, civilization may one day also generate a culture. Instead of assuming the existence of discrete world pictures, Wittgenstein suggested that Spengler would have done better to have spoken of family resemblances within and between cultural epochs and periods. In his notes on Fraser, he described magical and scientific culture as being held together by different webs of family resemblances and thus clearly constituting different families. In reflecting thus on historical cultures, Wittgenstein rejected Fraser's attempt to think about culture as part of a continuous causal evolutionary chain. He accepted instead Spengler's morphological, or we might say typological way of thinking, in which cultures have to be seen as distinct realities with their own internal formation. This becomes evident in uncertainty with its preoccupation with the logical structure of world pictures, in which some elements are said to stand fast and to serve as axes or hinges around which other elements can turn. Interesting as this view is, it provides us, however, only with a limited picture of history, since it reveals nothing of the forces that drive the process of historical variation. A political history will, by contrast, be inevitably causal and genealogical in character. It needs to deal with how events bear causally on each other, how we have traveled on the road of cause and effect to the present moment, and what causal effects current events and happenings may have on the future.